And hi, everybody. My name is Craig Stevens. I am the spokesperson for GAIN, Grow America's Infrastructure Now. This is our fourth webinar. Today, we're really going to be focusing on the energy sector and specifically Louisiana. And we're so happy to have Senator Bill Cassidy with us today to talk about what's going on with the energy sector here in the United States when it comes to federal policy, and also how Louisiana has become an epicenter for energy in the United States and also as an export location for so much energy that goes to other parts of the world as we tip the scales for freedom and democracy in places around the world and also lift and help lift other economies out of energy poverty. So, Senator Cassidy, so great for you to be with us today.
Hey, thank you very much, Craig. Good to be with you, man.
So you've been a vocal champion of the industry. Of course, you're a vocal champion for your home state. You know, how important is America's energy sector to Louisiana?
Yeah, so I'd say it's important to Louisiana. It's important to our country. It's important to the world. There's some issues that are so tied together. You mentioned Louisiana at the epicenter. Let me just kind of put that in the center of these tied together. We have an issue of energy, how we're going to produce it, have energy security. We have an issue of what to do about climate. People are very concerned about carbon intensity of different products. We got an issue of economy. What do we do for the individual, not just our country, not just my state, but for the families that comprise my state and our country? And what do we do about national security? I would say that the United States energy policy addresses them all. And let me just elaborate. Okay, let's just take natural gas. As we know, because of natural gas produced from Louisiana, Texas, and elsewhere, that our emissions in the United States are less now than they were in 2005. Despite an economy which is 10% bigger, much more oil and gas production, and much more manufacturing taking place. And we know that that has given us an economic security and an economic advantage relative to other states. Okay, so energy is helping us economically from the family level to the country level as well. Secondly, it's important worldwide. If Germany is using our natural gas instead of their coal, their emissions go down. China uses their coal instead of our natural gas, and they're the #1 producer of emissions worldwide. And then if you feed into that our national security chain, to the degree that our economy is strong, I heard just a really good Cicero quote lately. Money is the sinew of war. Now, I would say the money is the sinew of natural defense. If we don't have a strong economy driven by a strong energy sector, which makes our products more competitive worldwide compared to those from China or Europe, then we don't have the economy that can support our people, but by the way, also support our national defense. That's a kind of a long answer, Craig, but there's a lot in that question. And that energy sector is important for our state, our nation, and our country.
So considering that, you know, what deleterious effects does the president's decision to stall these permits for additional construction have on Louisiana and have on energy export?
Okay, so Louisiana is home for some of the largest LNG export facilities in the world. I think I'm told that maybe the largest construction project in the world is taking place right now in Plaquemines Parish, and there's others just as big being planned. So it's creating jobs for people who don't have college educations, but they're good people. And if they get a good job, their family life is better, their children are better, their grandchildren are better. And if they don't have a job, it goes in the wrong direction. So they're going to kill those jobs. Secondly, remember what I mentioned? Supposedly, what they're concerned about is the life cycle emissions. They want to make sure that greenhouse gas emissions don't worsen. But that's why I referred earlier to the fact that emissions in the United States are lower now than they were in 2005 because we had changed cleaner burning natural gas for less clean burning coal. And the degree that we export that natural gas worldwide allows other countries to do the same. So I think they're kind of, oh my gosh, it's good for the environment that we don't approve these, is upside down. It is better for the world's environment if we ship our natural gas overseas. So it's the economy. It is also our natural gas. And one of their concerns is if we ship so much natural gas, the price differential between natural gas going to Europe versus natural gas here in the United States erodes, and we lose our competitive advantage. But there's always going to be a friction cost a cost of processing and shipping. There's never the same efficiency as pumping something from Haynesville Shale down to Lake Charles to be turned into an essential plastic for our nation's economy. All their arguments ring false. I think the only one that rings true that this is a political sop to their environmental left ahead of an election season. Excuse me for being cynical.
I mean, to that point, I know that you and Senator Barrasso have introduced legislation. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Barrasso and I are trying to do a CRA in which we would reverse this and in which we would say, okay, Mr. President, you can't do this. Now, he's going to veto it, but we're trying to make a point that that's the case. And if we can make that point, at least we're somewhere on the messaging war.
So earlier you talked about Germany and Germany using U.S. natural gas. Now, we see Russia using its energy as a weapon. They've weaponized their energy industry. They are a petro-authoritarian nation. They have done this for decades. How do you see the U.S. in our energy ability able to influence what's going on in Ukraine and other places throughout the hemisphere, that hemisphere?
Yeah, so we help insulate the EU and our allies elsewhere from the ability to have energy blackmail by a state such as Russia. So the degree that we ensure an adequate supply of natural gas for the Germans, take that example, helps their economy. Let me also point out that not almost all, but many, if not most, German homes are heated with gas. You can talk about electrification, but if a home is heated with gas, it's going to be extremely expensive and impossible to quickly convert those to being heated with electricity from natural gas. And fortunately, Europe had a mild winter last time. But if they can't buy natural gas, or if they have to pay a really high price for it, it's going to cause what is called energy poverty. People are paying so much for their fuel costs, they have no disposable income. That's when you start to erode popular support for a government policy that would confront Russia. Our response, our ability to provide the Germans in particular with natural gas is multi-layered. And every one of those layers is positive for us, and it's positive for the Germans, and it's negative for Russia. And the degree that this administration's policy make it difficult to supply them with natural gas erodes those advantages.
What role do you think U.S. energy development and this whole debate will have in this election? We know who the two candidates will be for president. We know the Senate map. When talking about what's going on in Pennsylvania with the Senate race up there, but also with the energy development, what's going on in Louisiana and other places, what do you think happens when it comes to this discussion on the presidential stage? I mean, you mentioned it seems like the president's ban is political, right? He's trying to get, in my view, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but in my view, he's trying to get votes from a subset of the electorate that opposes U.S. energy development. How do you think this plays out, or how do you think this impacts the election?
Well, let's just speak about Pennsylvania, a swing state. There are a lot of energy workers in Pennsylvania. It has brought a lot of wealth to individual, kind of political subdivisions, if you will, from royalty taxes related to the energy production, as well as lots of jobs. I suspect there's lots of folks that have moved from states like Louisiana to Pennsylvania. I always say that wherever there's energy developed around the world, there's someone named Boudreaux and somebody named Thibodeau, which are really good South Louisiana names. But they go there, they marry, they stay, they have families, and they realize the financial livelihood of their family, of their community, is linked to developing America's natural resources. When the president has an hostility towards it, he is going to, frankly, lose votes. I'll also point out that many of the trade unions, think pipe fitters, they are very dependent upon this industry to provide them with a good livelihood. The president's kind of blown off their interest, as I think, from my perception, is pandering to his environmental left.
It's a great point. We really are, Grow America's Infrastructure Now really does support an all of the above energy sector. And one of the things I was able to do was actually go down to Louisiana, down to Houma, and visit Schwest, where they were building the Echo Edison, this large boat that is actually going to serve the offshore wind industry. It's going to be a floating hotel for the offshore wind industry. And, I was down there 3-4 months ago, and they're about halfway done. I know they're getting closer to actually christening the boat. It's an impressive ship. What's your thought on how Louisiana plays a role into other sectors, other pieces of the energy sector?
Yeah, so I am, well, and I'm going to add something perhaps even to what you just said. I know that those wind farms are expected to be Jones Act compliant. And so there are boat builders in my state and elsewhere who are building those service vessels in order to serve those wind farms. That's a good thing. That's number one. Secondly, there are wind leases off the coast of Louisiana and Texas that are being let. And so there will be some development off of our coastline. That's number two. And then number three, related to the energy sector, is carbon sequestration. And Louisiana is, I think, well poised to take advantage of sequestration. During the bipartisan infrastructure bill, there's a provision I got in that will allow sequestration of carbon dioxide emissions offshore. And Exxon bought some leases right afterwards. I'm assuming they bought those in order to sequester. Secondly, Louisiana now has primacy for Class 6 wells that will allow our Department of Environmental Quality, following the EPA guidelines, to permit these wells inside our state. So those companies which wish to sequester can do so more rapidly. Texas is behind us. As in Houston, I saw a Houston Chronicle headline. It said Louisiana beating Texas, and then the subheadline was about primacy. I said, I'm not used to seeing that headline unless LSU is playing Texas A&M.
Thank you for your insights today. I do have one question. I'm going to turn it a little bit different. I've got two young daughters, 12 and 13 years old, and I think that they're looking into the family business of public service and want to get involved. And so what advice would you have to the younger folks, younger generations listening today about how they should be thinking about getting involved in public service?
Work hard, work hard, work hard, work hard. Whenever anybody criticizes the younger generation, I have people working for me from 22 to 35, so 35-year-olds young, and I just brag on them. They work hard, and I give them more and more responsibility, and then they go out of my office someplace else. So that's what I tell my kids, my grandson. That's what we should tell them all: work hard.
So thank you for your time. Do you have any closing thoughts, Senator Cassidy, before I let you go here?
No, thank you for spreading the word. My gosh, the energy sector in particular is so critical to our country's future. And frankly, fossil fuel is key to a modern economy. The more that we educate people to that, the better our country is. Thank you for doing so.
Thank you for being on today, Senator Cassidy. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Craig.
So I'd like to turn now to our panel. We've got former Congressman Charlie Melanson. We've got Dr. Ellen Walden, also former head of PHMSA, Brigham McCowan. Charlie, we just heard the senator talk about how the energy sector is so important to Louisiana. Any thoughts on what he said, or anything you want to expand on with what he had to say today?
He pretty much covered the whole area of energy in Louisiana. I mean, this state is very blessed with the natural resources that we've had. And the supply of the energy is not just a Louisiana thing. It's not just a Southwest Louisiana thing. It's a global thing, as you talked about the SWES. A family-owned boat building business that's probably one of the largest in the world and still privately owned by the family. That's economic development. That's what industry has brought, the oil industry. Their father was a shrimper who started doing seismograph work with his shrimp boat. It's a great story. It's a success story if there ever was one for America. But what's going on with the banning of the permits is, I think, totally wrong. I don't agree with Biden and the administration on this. Doesn't mean I'm not going to vote for him, because I'm more than a one-person issue person. I look at the whole package. But from a standpoint of energy, from a standpoint of Louisiana, I guess the old Tip O'Neill saying that all politics are local. Let's look at what it does for Louisiana. Let's look at what the plant that's first on the chopping block in Lake Charles. That's jobs for the people. that's in economic impact, that's positive in nature. It is greening up. There's 30% reduction in emissions, carbon emissions, over the past decade, and that's because of the natural gas, LNG, and providing that to the world, help and producing it keeps the price down. If we start shutting it down, then the price will start going back up, whether it's for us or developing countries or our European allies. It's not good. But all in all, and I was asked about the effects domestically in the region. In the region, you're doing harm with this action of stopping the permitting, because it takes away economic advantage. It takes away good paying jobs. It takes away tax bases that will fund hospitals, healthcare, sheriffs, fire protection, schools, the whole gamut of what government does to help for the betterment of the community.
Thank you. And I'd like to bring in Dr. Ellen Wald, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. Dr. Wald, could you expand a little bit about what we were just talking about with Senator and also with Congressman Malance on what are some of the impacts of this ban, whether it's temporary or more longer term? What are we seeing as some of those challenges of the impacts of the president's ban right now?
Yeah, I think that I mean this is a decision that is going to have extremely serious long-range consequences, even if it's the kind of thing that does end up getting reversed, after the election. It's still going to have some very, very serious consequences. The first being that it injects real instability into the U.S. energy industry, and not just LNG. We're talking about the natural gas industry, the oil industry, midstream, every aspect of the energy industry here. The regulatory instability is highly problematic. And I think we're going to address that a little bit later, but it also throws the natural gas and the oil industries a major curveball. One of them being the fact that natural gas prices in the US are very low. That's very good for consumers, but it's problematic for producers because we want them to continue to produce natural gas. And so selling that natural gas abroad is an important outlet for these producers to be able to make the money they need to continue to produce. We're already seeing natural gas producers in the US curb their production. Chesapeake, for example, is not just curbing its production or plans to curb it, I think maybe 20% this year, but it's actually curbing it even more now. We're seeing even more cutbacks. So this is a serious problem that affects not just LNG, but a lot of different aspects of the U.S. energy industry. Then environmentally, I think this was mentioned, but cutting off supplies of natural gas does not benefit the environment. We want more natural gas, not less natural gas. Natural gas does not get replaced with renewables. It gets replaced with coal. We saw this very clearly with Pakistan, when they couldn't afford spot cargoes of LNG after European demand made prices soar, they went straight to burning coal. So, and burning coal is just about the worst source of energy you can find for the environment. So this is not going to result in some sort of surge in renewables. It's going to result less natural gas exports is going to result in more environmentally poor choices for energy. And then the move has major implications for foreign policy. Our allies and partners have been depending and have grown dependent on U.S. LNG. U.S. LNG production has just expanded exponentially. I mean, the growth is incredible. If you look, starting in 2016, U.S. LNG exports grew by an average of more than 4 billion cubic feet each month. That's according to the EIA data. And this expansion has had a major impact on our allies and our partners. Europe, Japan, but also South America in particular have been major purchasers of our LNG. Japan was hoping to invest in one of the projects that's now halted because it can't get a permit. Where are they going to go now? Are these Japanese investors going to take their money and look to Qatar? Are they going to look to some other even more unsavory source of LNG? Because they're not going to just sit around and wait for maybe someday when they decide to change their mind here. And so American LNG has been said, the only reason Europe isn't burning more coal now that they're off of Russian natural gas, and they're going to need more LNG to continue to cut back on coal. And this move by the Biden administration really throws all of that into question, and definitely has the potential to possibly hasten Ukraine's submission to Russia if Europe can't hold out, if it can't get its hands on more affordable LNG.
Thank you. So Brigham, I'd like to bring you into the conversation here. Brigham is someone who has served in the uniform, who has served in administration, who travels around the world looking at the energy sector, looking at energy infrastructure, the pipeline sector. What type of concerns do you have when it comes to this administration shutting off the spigot when it comes to U.S. energy?
Yeah, first of all, Craig, thanks for having me on. Honored to be here with Gain. I mean, this decision is really misguided. And this is part of the problem that we have with politics in Washington, D.C. today, is that what used to be policy, what used to be largely bipartisan, all of these decisions are being weaponized for political gain. It's really frustrating. This decision is misguided. It has caused significant concerns throughout the international community. Let's keep in mind that Europe produces only about 10% of its needed natural gas domestically. While Dr. Wald is absolutely correct, Europe is trying to get off of natural gas, but they are still importing Russian gas. And the Germans with whom I spoke last month admitted that, they're taking some Russian LNG in now. We are, in essence, continuing to fund the war in Ukraine. We've seen letters from the European Chamber of Commerce, the Japanese Chamber of Commerce, and many others expressing absolute bewilderment with this. It throws not only our industry, but the entire market into chaos and creates risk, right? And that regulatory risk is a bar to investment in capital. But on the security front, it really jeopardizes global energy security. And let's remember that energy security is that uninterruptible access to reliable and affordable energy. And I think, as the panel is also saying, it also sets back international climate targets. This is not helping. One need only look at the U.S. experiment, where natural gas has replaced coal in some of our demand distribution and generation for baseload energy. And we've seen massive reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, more than in Europe, quite frankly. It also shows that the U.S. is reneging on its commitments to Europe and to Asia. It sends a weak signal to our allies that we don't have their backs, coming on the heels of this administration saying, don't worry, we'll provide you with as much gas as you need. It emboldens our enemies as well because it projects weakness. I was in Germany last month meeting with the German government's energy security officials. Privately, they're concerned. And behind the scenes, they talk about realism. And I like to say that realism is really important because physics eats policy for lunch 7 days out of the week. And so when Russia invaded Ukraine, the U.S. was able to fill their supply gaps. Now our allies may need to turn to countries like Russia or Qatar, or even worse, Iran, that shares what's called the South Pars North Dome gas field with Qatar, which is the largest natural gas field in the world.
Thanks, Brigham, for that additional color. I mean, it's really to your point about realism. I mean, we can talk all we want, and rhetoric there's a lot of rhetoric out there, but when it comes down to brass tacks, I mean, there is realism, and we have the ability in the United States to make a significant impact. In this administration, in my opinion, is choosing not to. Dr. Wald, if I can bring you back, what kind of jobs impact do you think this is having in Louisiana? This stalling of additional construction.
Yeah, well, according, to some reports, it seems like, it could result in the loss of, it definitely puts into question at least, 250,000 jobs potentially. But like I said, it's not just the LNG industry. It's not just these specific projects. It's also it also spreads outward to the oil industry and the natural gas industry in general. If you inject this kind of instability, if people don't know that they're going to be able to depend on a permitting process that has been in place in the United States for a while, and yes, the Biden administration, the permitting time has increased exponentially under the Biden administration. It used to take about maybe 100 or so days to get permitting. Now it's over 330 days. And now it's basically, you know, suspended indefinitely. But there was still the knowledge that, yes, if you went through the process, it might take longer, but you would still get the result in the end. Now you're talking about not knowing whether you're even going to get this result, and probably won't. And that throws into question people's jobs. People may have signed up to work, you know, to produce more natural gas for these plants, and now those jobs are in question as well. So it's not just the ones that are physically constructing these LNG plants, it's also all of these ancillary jobs, all of these jobs that we're going to build pipelines that we're going to supply it, or we're going to you know, frack the wells or do the transportation. And that is really a significant issue.
So as a follow-up to that, Dr. Wald, we see a lot of the delay tactics that are just put in place to, in my opinion, end some of these end some of these projects. What types of impacts to the industry do these delay tactics have, whether it's the government or protesters or unnecessary reviews of some of these projects?
Yeah, I think that this is one of the most severe consequences of this kind of action, and that is that they are undermining the trust in the US system, in our capitalist system. One of the major benefits of doing business in America with the American business system is the rule of law and the expectation that certain processes occur, and you can depend on these processes, and you can depend on getting the result you want at the end of it. It's not dependent on whether, you know, you bribed some official's niece's husband or gave them a job. It's dependent on whether you followed the correct steps and the rules and you adhere to the laws, and therefore, you know, you should get to form your business, to get your permit, and so on and so forth. And when an executive just halts this process with little warning for an indefinite period of time, and seemingly for political reasons, it really pulls the rug out from every party involved, but it also makes everybody else who is thinking about getting involved, who wants to do business, very wary. Are you really willing to commit the money and the effort and the time and the people to go through this permitting process if, you know, right at the finish line, some executive can say, oh, well, you know, there are some, you know, 20-year-olds who I really want to vote for me, and so I'm just going to kill all permitting in hopes that they might vote for me in November. I mean, that seems very, very it doesn't make logical sense, and it really goes against the entire idea of the American capitalist business system. And now and forevermore, anyone considering investing or getting into this industry in the United States, buying, building, supplying, working for, they will always be looking over their shoulder, wondering if any moment this project could be halted for essentially no, you know, reason. Not like they are giving a reason that has to do with, you know, structural instability or an actual logical reason. This is basically a political reason that makes very little sense, even from an environmental standpoint. And it makes everyone involved very hesitant, makes everything more expensive for the future. And it really, I think, throws the security of the entire US energy industry into doubt, but also of the US business system, and whether you really want to get involved in something that could be considered political and could be halted at any time. This is really something you'd expect from a developing country or a communist system or a dictatorship. One of the greatest elements of our system is the expectation that if you follow the rules and go through the prescribed process, you will get the end result. And there was a certainty to this ever since, you know, President Obama authorized, you know, the building of these plants and said that they are in the U.S. interest. There was a certainty in going through with this. Now there isn't, and that damage, I think, is really incalculable.
Yeah, we've talked a lot on these webinars about the idea of regulatory certitude and regulatory certainty. And to your point, Dr. Wald, if a company is going to take on the risk of several $1 billion and its investors are going to take on, and banks are going to take on those risks, there really needs to be, again, in my opinion, the ability for those companies, those investors to recoup that expense. And, since we're all part of the 401k system, many of us across the country have stocks in a lot of these companies. We're all part of the capitalist system that you talked about. We all have a benefit financially by making sure these projects are able to move forward separately and above how they impact not only U.S. national security, but also our allies around the world. I'd like to bring you back just for a final word. When it comes to this, we've talked a lot about exports today, and Dr. Wall talked a little bit about how the price is depreciating when it comes to U.S. energy development, and that harms developers because they want to see a higher price so they can make a profit at a specific margin. So we want to make sure there's enough volume on the global marketplace in order to support our own needs, but also those around the globe. Can you talk a little bit about how exports actually help U.S. national security?
Yeah, they do for several reasons. Number one, it's an instrument of what we would call soft power. If we go back to World War II, we'll see that 80% of the Allied war effort, the oil that was used and the gasoline, the diesel, came from America. And that includes not only England and some of our larger allies, that included Russia as well. Not only were we the arsenal of democracy, but we were the energy arsenal of democracy. That need for raw materials directly supports and enhances our security and the security of our allies, because many of our allies are back in the same position where they don't have the available resources that we have. And so I think that is really important. You will see part of America's strength. We talk about economic strength, but we also talk about exporting America to other countries. We can help other countries with the energy supplies that we can produce. We can help their quality of life. We can raise them out of poverty. We can help them cut their global emissions, because let's be honest, if no one is suddenly going to say, oh, I can't get natural gas, well, I'll just stop using fossil fuel. That's silly. They're going to go back to what they were using beforehand, coal, wood, or worse. These are as important as exporting grain, wheat, and food abroad for America. It is a strength that we have. It's maybe one of our best strengths. And let's keep in mind that throughout human development, the world has really never used less energy, only more. We can't conserve our way out of this. As developing and less developed countries improve, they want a better quality of life, and that requires energy, and that is a valuable American export that we can help the world with.
Excellent. Thanks, Brigham. And we've got Charlie Malance on. So Charlie, I'd like to give you the last word here. Talking about, earlier we talked about Schwest and how they're building boats for the offshore wind industry. So Louisiana is really become this epicenter of energy, whether it's offshore wind, as Senator Cassidy mentioned, building assets for the industry, for Ørsted, as they are building some wind farms up in the Northeast here. How does Louisiana, the manufacturing sector, play into a broader U.S. energy portfolio?
Well, first, let me apologize. I had a phone call came in. Next thing I knew, I was gone. I'm not the tech savvy person, but that's kind of just proves my point, I guess. From a standpoint of what the senator said about Louisiana, whenever you go somewhere in the world, not just in the United States, you're liable to find a Boudreaux or Thibodeau or some other Cajun name there, because they were in there boots on first years ago, and their families, their descendants, just like handing down a business. They've been in the industry for years. The technology that's been derived from Louisianians, the innovations that have been experienced through the years with oil and gas production, come from Louisiana, or a lot of them come from Louisiana. But one of the things that I know is that we are never going to not need some fossil fuels. LNG right now is the cleanest to give us the hope to get us to the green side of things, to save this earth if we're going to do it. When I was in the Congress, there were naysayers, just didn't want to believe the science that we were heading towards a problem with global warming or extreme weather change. some made fun of it. It's not funny issue now. I worry every day about the world that I'll leave my children and my grandchildren. And is it one that's going to be there for future generations or for them, period? I worry about it. But from a standpoint of the innovation and the technology and the things that Louisiana have done, we are, as the senator said, an epicenter. We and probably Texas are the two most progressive and aggressive in the production of the fuels. And to produce LNG is a positive thing. It is not a negative thing. Just because it is one of the fossil fuels, it is the least dangerous or the least hazardous from a standpoint of global warming, extreme weather change. And we need to embrace it. We need to realize that tomorrow won't be shut down and we're off on total solar panels and other ways of getting our energy needs met. It's going to take time, but the best way to do it, LNG permitting, getting this ban lifted, and watching these companies make the investments that provide the jobs for the citizenry, that brings the tax base for the citizenry, that improves the quality of life, not only for us, but for the state of Louisiana, the nation that we live in, and the entire world, the countries that are developing and emerging, and as well as our allies in Europe.
Thank you, Congressman Watson. We'll let you have the last word. I'd like to bring the panel back just to thank them. Dr. Wald, thank you for joining us today. Brigham, always good to see you. Appreciate your time. And to the nearly 500 people who joined us today, a new record for us on these webinars. We really appreciate your time and hope to continue this discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig. Again, I apologize.
Thank you, Craig.